This video showcases a card game. Barnga addresses student cultural expectations. Barnga is a simulation game that was created by a USAID worker in 1980 who was working in Barnga, Liberia. He and his colleagues were trying to play euchre. They all had different interpretations of how to play the game. And so he had an aha moment. He realized that sometimes misinterpretations and misunderstandings can come from subtle places, and not only from really these major conflicts or major obvious disagreements. So he created this game to tease out some of those subtleties. What it entails is it is a card game. And so you notice on the tables, each table has a deck of cards. It's a smaller deck than you're used to, but it's a deck of cards. There's also on the table some other handouts. The green one is scrap paper, in case you desire scrap paper at any point. The blue one is rules of the tournament, because the tournament itself is going to have multiple rounds of this particular card game. And so in a second, we'll go through those tournament rules. And also on the table, what I just laid down are the actual rules of the card game. I didn't want you all playing ahead of time, so I held off before putting those down. So what we're going to do is I'll go through the different tournament rules. I'll give you an opportunity to practice the game itself so that you can read together the game rules. And I'll give you a few minutes to just learn it. And then what we're going to do is we'll play the tournament. And then after the end of the tournament, what we'll do is we'll talk about it. The stated goals of Barnga are, number one, to use the simulation as a way to have fun while also addressing a serious topic. Number two, to learn to communicate effectively. And number three, to learn how to work well in a cross-cultural group. Additional goals would build on goals 2 and 3, and really helping people understand what role communication has in being able to work effectively as a group. What happens when somebody operates from their own set of rules or norms and not everybody else in the group is sharing those rules or norms? And how can communication really help in minimizing confusion and maximizing understanding in those moments of cross-cultural group work? It could be a great activity for first-year seminar courses with students who are new to the university and are operating now in a new context with new sets of rules. It's also a great activity for introducing intercultural understanding. We all tend to make a lot of assumptions about groups that we're not a part of. And those assumptions are rooted in our own norms. And so being able to use an activity like this helps us really question our assumptions, where they came from, and interrogate how useful they might be to us moving forward. These are the materials you would need to set up Barnga. Face down under the table tent are the card game rules. And remember, these are all printed on the same color paper, and they're face down at each of the tables. It's really important that they all look the same, but on each table, those rules are a little bit different. In some of the rules, there might be aces being high, others aces low. There might be a trump of a different suit, or maybe there's no trump at all. But it's very important that students do not realize that there are different rules at each of the different tables. Each table would get a shortened deck of cards. It only has numbers 2 through 7 and also the aces. And they would also get a table marker, and that is a placard on their table that says their group number on it. There are also tournament rules, tournament guidelines on each of the tables face up. Finally, this simulation is done in silence. And so as soon as the instructor explains how it's going to work, the next thing they say is that it's done in silence. There's going to be no verbal communication. And so what that means is there's no speaking, there's no sign language, but that's why you have scrap paper in case you want to draw pictures. Again, not words. You can also gesture and try to use nonverbal communication to be able to communicate. And it's important that the silence is consistent throughout the entire simulation. Just a friendly reminder that it's silent, no writing of words. You can gesture, but no sign language. Same tournament rules apply. The room is typically set up with 4 or 5 tables, about 4 or 5 students per each table. And when students come in, they can sit wherever they want. The number of chairs and tables depend on the number of students in the class. If there's confusion about moving to another table, instructors should remind students to move according to the tournament guide sheet and that they should not be talking. Instructors should not answer questions about where to move or help them to work it out. The debriefing usually occurs in 3 parts. The first part is descriptive. It's where we ask students what they experienced, and often they're eager to share emotions of what they felt during the simulation. Students might have felt frustrated, irritated, confused, stressed, while other students who didn't move at all during the simulation might be confused why everybody was having such a hard time. The second part of the debrief is the application part. It's where we ask questions around, so what does Barnga simulate? We've been calling it a simulation. What does it simulate? As well as what caused some of the problems that came up in the simulation. And the third and final part of this debrief is the takeaways. So this is a key opportunity to really build closure to the experience and to have students share what it is they're taking away from either the simulation or the debriefing that's followed. One way to do that is to pass out index cards to everybody and have them write down one takeaway or lingering question on that index card. You can collect them all and redistribute them at random and have people read out loud the index card that they're holding. So as a group, you get an understanding about the different takeaways that them and their peers have shared. Here are some things to keep in mind as a facilitator. In my experience, I've noticed that when the debriefing begins, students are very eager to talk about that simulation. They want to share the emotions that came up. Often they want to vent. And so first, really ask some questions that get them to be able to share some of that. It's a cathartic moment. They need that release.
Like we were having the confusion and stuff, so she had got the pen and started writing it in a really clear way. And I was trying to explain my rules, but I couldn't do it in a way that was clearer than hers. So I was like, I guess she wins. I'm going by that.
And then really challenge them to be able to move on from the simulation. That transition's really important, and the students might not make it on their own. So when you're doing that transition towards the application phase of the debrief, you want to ask questions about how it relates to the class, how it relates to U of M, how it relates to Michigan, to the US, to the world, and to be able to really focus the debrief in some different layers. I want you to think about other situations that resemble the dynamics that occurred in this simulation. Maybe situations that have impacted you in your own life, right? Or ones that you've witnessed or that you know about that happen in society. And to think and talk as a group about the ways in which Barnga simulates real life.
It was my freshman year of high school when I moved, and I will never forget. My mom picked me up on the first day of school, and she said, "How was your first day of school?" And I said, "Mom, why is everyone white?" And I was just like, there is literally no diversity here. And I guess I never had realized how much diversity I knew until it was kind of taken away. So it was just really interesting thinking about the cultural dynamics of different places and how the social norms or expectations can be reinforced in different places, and how different the roles can be, and how difficult it can be to adjust to those.
Race and gender, the intersectionality between the two, I found have really come together, and it's been very awkward. So choosing the battles again was the situation I experienced here.
You want to win, sometimes it changes people, and so kind of in the real world, how money or business or just being successful can really change people and even change the way you treat other people.
And so you might decide, based on the goals of your class or the goals of this session, to focus in a particular place, but know that all of that is possible. As you're thinking about your debrief and what that goal is that you want to get to, and you're thinking about what the questions are that you want to ask to get to that goal, it might be useful to print out a couple of those key questions and to share it with the students, to give everybody a copy of those debrief questions. The pros of it is that you're more likely to be able to stay on task and actually work towards achieving that particular goal. The con is that you might feel like you're more confined then and you couldn't go in a direction that might be sort of off script. And so you think about what works for you, but it might be helpful to think about passing something out for people to follow along with, at least the 3 different parts of the debrief. In this simulation, students make a lot of decisions. As they move from a table to another table, they might decide to take over in that new table and to impose the rules that they learned, thinking that they were right. And of course, they would be the same rules that this new table would play with. Why not? But they're not the same rules, and so that type of decision or behavior might reflect cultural imperialism.
Well, like I was saying earlier, like I just played my way at every table. So if I won, I made sure that I won. But if I lost, it was like, okay, it is what it is.
How did you communicate that?
Well, I know at the first table that I moved to, I drew like a table, and I'm like, at table 3, this is what we do. And then like somebody else in my group, they wrote like at table 4, this is how it is, and things like that. So I was trying to explain my way, and everyone was trying to like come together and explain their way. They're like, oh, okay. And then we all ended up playing my way. So.
Another decision that's often made when a student moves to a new table is that they decide to bend the way that they're playing to fit in with that new set of rules. They don't question it, they follow along, and that might resemble pure assimilation. And the third way that students might approach that same decision making would be for them to blend together the rules that they learned with the new rules of that table, and to find a new way of playing that's actually this pure integration of the 2 sets of rules. Students will do all 3 of these things and more. And so it can provide a really nice substantive conversation for debriefing. It's important to get them to reflect on when they make those same decisions in real life. So the follow-up discussion is obviously the point where the students really learn the most. And in order to maximize that, during the simulation, watch. Watch moments of frustration, of confusion, attempted communication, and take a lot of notes. Right? Smile and enjoy your time, but be neutral. The Barnga authors provide a set of principles that they think are important to a facilitator who wants to lead this activity. Some of those are thinking about what happens when somebody violates a rule. This I've seen in my own experience too. If a student moves to another table and they perceive something as a rule violation, they assign either a title of ignorant or dishonest to that person. They think, oh, well, they never understood the game, they're ignorant to how it's supposed to be played, or they're trying to cheat me. They're trying to cheat and have others sort of coalescing around that cheating in order to disadvantage me. And so those types of dynamics can be interesting and important to watch out for. Even at the end of the simulation and into the debriefing, it's interesting that some students, many students, still believe that their rules were the right rules. There's this power of ethnocentrism that just weighs into the conversation. It takes a lot of work sometimes to get people to realize that there was no one set of right rules, that each set of these rules was right in their own way. Cultural friction also comes up a lot in those moments. And in real life, we realize that cultural friction is aggravated by communication breakdowns. And so that is one of the reasons why really focusing on communication, doing an activity like Barnga, can be really, really helpful. Because cultural friction and communication breakdowns are 2 things that happen a lot of times in our lives. When there's communication breakdowns, a lot of times people look to an external arbitrator to come in and fix it, to moderate, to help through that conversation. Barnga, there's no external arbitrator. Sometimes they'll try to bring you in as an instructor to have you help out, but you don't. You just let them figure it out for themselves. And it's important that they have that opportunity to really navigate those cultural breakdowns on their own, with the added challenge of having to do it in silence. In life, it's often true that people who communicate effectively, they get their way. They're the ones who have influence over sets of rules. They're the ones who might get promotions or opportunities because of their effective communication. and really questioning and understanding the value of communication in our society, and getting our students to understand the complexity of communication and to develop some skills around ways that they might communicate most effectively for them is really important. In Barnga, communication happens in some unconventional ways. And it's interesting that sometimes people get embarrassed. Many times they get embarrassed when they have to communicate in unconventional ways. In Barnga, you know it's silent. They can gesture, they can draw, but they can't write words. And so they have to come up with creative ways of really communicating and getting their point across. Barnga is very much about communication. I believe, and the Barnga authors say, that communication, time spent really focusing on communication, is never wasted. I would argue it can even be more valuable than the task at hand. Thank you for watching today. Any handouts associated with Barnga are available on our website. And we really hope that you try this out in your classroom. If you do, let us know how it went. There's a way to give feedback on our website. We'd love to know how your students experienced this simulation.